Let me ask you this. Have you ever watched a movie and wondered why does it feel so satisfying when everything falls into place at just the right moment? Well, that's the magic of 3-act structure at work. Whether you're a screenwriter, novelist, or just a curious movie buff, understanding the structure is key to crafting stories that grip your audience from beginning to the end. Now, the 3-act structure does not apply to movies. It can apply to various formats. So let's decode it together. Hey storytellers, welcome back to the channel. So what exactly is the 3-act structure? It's a storytelling framework that divides your story into 3 distinct parts: the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. It's the backbone of countless classic and modern stories, from Hollywood blockbusters to indie films. But why does it work so well? Let's break it down. Once you understand, you can also modify them, you can also break them, but you'll have to understand that first. Act 1 is all about setting the stage. This is where you introduce your characters, establish the world they live in, and present the central conflict. It's crucial to grab your audience's attention right from the start.
Shoot me. Come on.
No, I can't
Do it! How'd you like that?
How do you do it?
Give them a reason to care about your protagonist and the journey they are about to embark on. Think of it like painting a seed. You're setting up everything that will unfold later. A great example, The Matrix. Within the first 30 seconds, we meet Neo, learn about the Matrix, and get a glimpse of the stakes involved. By end of Act 1, your protagonist usually faces a major turning point, often called the inciting incident, that propels them into Act 2. Now in Act 1, we call exposition. We establish the world, we establish the character, we establish the kind of relationships that the character has, who belongs in this particular world of the film. It's largely about setting the premise. Act 1 is also about where there is a normal life. The life of the protagonist is established, right? There is something which is going on, which is day to day. There is always a routine that we establish right in the beginning to show how his life is, right? The protagonist's life, his family, who he interacts with, how does his day begins, how does the day go on. And then something changes, and that propels to Act 2. Now let's move into the heart of the story, the Act 2. The confrontation, right? Act 2 is where the real action happens. This is the longest part of your story, typically taking up about half of the entire narrative. Here, your protagonist faces a series of challenges and obstacles that test their resolve, which breaks their routine, right? Now he gets up, go to work, and he opens the door and there is a dinosaur standing there. The tension builds as they confront the central conflict, often leading to moments of doubt or failure. This is also where subplots develop and relationships evolve. In Star Wars: A New Hope, Act 2 is where Luke Skywalker leaves Tatooine.
Take these 2 over to the garage, will you? I want them cleaned up before dinner.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
You can waste time with your friends when your chores are done. Now, come on, get to it.
All right, come on.
Joins the Rebel Alliance and begins his journey to become the hero. The stakes get higher. By end of Act 2, we usually hit crisis point, where things seem bleakest for our hero, setting the stage for a final showdown. In Act 2, the stakes keep getting worse and worse and worse. Now the routine has changed, right? He was happy, he was living a routine life in Act 1, and then something changed and that pushed him further. The narrative have changed. Now he has to do something to overcome that particular challenge. What has changed cannot be mended, right? It keeps getting worse and worse. And that's when the story gets more and more interesting. He has to overcome all the challenges, and every decision that he takes creates another loop or another complication which keeps getting worse, and he has to overcome all of them. He can never go back to that routine unless he solves this problem. But it reaches to a point, right, where he has to make this critical choice. Now this comes back to character building, because ultimately in Act 1, when we build up the character, we will often give the character a fear or a motivation or something that is very essential, which is extremely crucial for this particular protagonist. By the end of Act 2, he will have to probably overcome that, the most crucial one, or the biggest fear that he has. He has to probably face that. If he has a fear of losing a child, and on the end of Act 2, he gets into a situation where if he doesn't do this, he's going to lose his child. If it is about, if he has a fear of heights, and he suddenly found himself fighting on top of a cliff. I'm just giving these examples, right? So this is where it has reached to a critical decision juncture, end of Act 2. And that brings us to the climax of the story, Act 3. Act 3 is where everything comes together. It's a resolution of our story, where the protagonist confronts the antagonist in a final showdown. This is where he is facing the biggest fear that he has.
Down, David.
Seems that envy is my sin.
Oh, what's in the box?
Not till you give me the
What's
gun.
in the fucking box?
Give me the gun. He just told you.
You lied! You're a fucking liar! Shut up!
That's what he wants. He wants you to shoot him.
No! No! You tell me that's not true. That's not true.
Become vengeance, David.
Ah, she's all right. You tell me.
Become wrath.
Tell me she's all right!
You murder a suspect, David.
No!
Just throw it all away, you know.
No!
She begged for her life, Detective.
Shut up!
She begged for her life.
Shut up.
And for the life of the baby inside of her.
Shut up!
He didn't know. Give me the gun, David.
And the conflict reaches its peak. The climax is followed by the denouement, that we call it, where the loose ends are tied up and the story reaches its conclusion. This act should provide a satisfying payoff to everything that's been set up in the previous acts. A great example is the final battle in The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. The climax is intense and the resolution brings closure to the characters' arcs and the epic journey they've been on. So this is where once he has overcome his fear, and this is when he makes this critical choice and he does it and he fights the biggest battle that he has ever faced in his life, and then it comes to the end, right, where he wins, of course, the victory or sometimes a loss. The protagonist often wins, but not necessarily in all movies. There are various structures of movies. There is shape of stories, which I'm making another video. If you want to understand how the shape of a story works, do comment. So by end of it, he has reached a final conclusion, a possible conclusion for what triggered, in Act 2, and then he has reached a conclusion. But there is something called denouement. Denouement is where, is it really the end? We leave a taste or a hook saying that, is it really the end? Most of the horror films leave a denouement saying that it's not completely over yet. The villain is not dead yet. The villain could come back. Or the problem is not completely solved yet. The loose ends are still there. So when you leave a loose end, it becomes a denouement which leads to the next part. And denouement not necessarily also have to be about the next act, but it could just leave an open end of something for audience to, mull over, basically. So why does the 3-act structure work so well? It's all about the rhythm and the balance. Each act serves a purpose, building tension and then releasing it in a way that keeps the audience engaged. It's a timeless formula that, when used effectively, can turn any story into a compelling journey. So why is the 3-act structure so important? Now let's imagine that we start with the conflict, right, where there is just fighting and we don't know anything about the character, and we could also slowly reveal the character over a period of time. That could be a premise, but more than often these are experiments. If you don't root for the protagonist, if you don't know who the protagonist is, where the protagonist comes from, what is happening to the protagonist, which world does he belong to, if we don't establish it in the right way, we could shuffle. There are 2000 shapes of stories. There are 2000 ways of structuring a story. Whether how we revealed, is it a step-by-step exposition, or is it a one shot exposition, or is it a traditional exposition? There is various expositions in the play, right? But ultimately the structure still remains the same, right? We need to establish who the person is. Without that, the audiences suddenly feel detached from what they're watching. They wouldn't know who they are following and what they are following, and which obviously leads them to feel very frustrated. Any movie that you take, you would find the structure. I would tell you that you should probably watch movies with a 3-act structure in mind and understand what was the exposition, how have they established relationship, how they've established what it does. And some expositions are very short, very quick. And some expositions are long and drawn out. Like I said, there is various types of expositions. Imagine where the film starts off with Act 2. Yes, it could. Can it start with Act 3? Yes, it could. But you still need an Act 1, because without that, it would feel incomplete. The 3 acts are extremely essential, and typically Act 1 is the first part of the film, or the first 30 pages specifically. Act 2 is after that, and the last 20 pages is what Act 3 is. Now, 20 is just a random number that I'm throwing, but you get the point, right, in terms of how it is divided. The longest usually is Act 2. So I hope you learned something from this. I mentor individuals to go through the entire process of writing a feature-length film, and I mentor them to even be part of the production of the independent feature film. If you're interested in such an opportunity, check out my website. I put the link on my description, and let's discuss and see how that goes. Whew, there you have it. A crash course on the 3-act structure. Whether you're writing your first screenplay or just wanted to understand your favorite movies better, this structure is a powerful tool to have in your storytelling arsenal. If you enjoyed this breakdown, give this video a thumbs up, share it with your fellow storytellers, and don't forget to subscribe for more tips on writing and filmmaking. Until next time, keep creating, keep watching, and remember, the best stories are the ones that take us on a journey. See you on the next one.